start us off, my name is Nicole. I'm the International Director of Freely in Hope. Freely in Hope exists to equip survivors to lead in ending the cycle of sexual violence. And what we're doing this month for April, because it's Sexual Assault Awareness Month, is we're having conversations about sexual assault awareness and how we can best respond. The theme for the day is building resilience in shared suffering. And I think we can all kind of identify right now in shared suffering in light of COVID-19. And so today we'll be speaking with two of my favorite therapists on best practices to supporting both survivors during this time and supporting ourselves in our own sense of resilience as we're all navigating the changes of our world on a daily basis. Just as a reminder, we're always doing Q&A. So if you have questions throughout the chat, please feel free to put it in the Q&A box and we'll answer them as they come. So, like I said, today I have two of my favorite therapists with us, Lubi and Joanne. And let me just say, having therapists as both friends and coworkers has been my lifesaver. Like, I need a lot of help. So the more friends that I have that are therapists, the more they can like keep me in check. So I'm just really grateful that Lubi and Joanne are with us today on this call, but also with us in the organization and in my life as friends to ensure that we are all moving toward this sense of shared healing and hope together. So I'm going to ask you two to introduce yourselves and to also share what inspires you in your work. So let's start with Joanne, all the way from Kenya.
Thanks, Nicole. My name is Joan Ngaruiya. I'm a trauma counselor. I've been practicing for about 8 years now. And during that time, I've had the privilege of working and also working with survivors from different walks of life. And I've had this privilege both in a public hospital setting and in the NGO setting. And while each experience has been unique, the goal has always been the same, supporting the clients and their support systems, if any, in their journey towards healing. And I think it's fulfilling when you see a client walk through their journey of healing. Yeah, and I'm happy to be here today. I hope to have a very interesting conversation today. So thank you.
Thanks, Joanne.
Hi, I'm Lubi Zulu. I'm a clinical psychologist based in Zambia, and I've been in the field of mental health now for the past over a decade, actually. And I've been supporting Freely in Hope, and I've known Nicole for the last 10 years. I'm glad to be here speaking today because I am passionate about mental health, and one of the things that really inspires me is people living their lives to their full potential. And mental health fits into that because when people are not mentally well, when their well-being has been affected, they're not able to do that. So I'm glad to be a part of helping people to be mentally well and live up their full potential and their destiny and all that they were created to be.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. So to start us off, when we talk about building resilience, I think that term can get a little like clinical sometimes. And I think we don't use those words on a daily basis, but it's so crucial to be resilient to, especially now, the constant changes that are happening in our environment. I just know in my work, like we are shifting left and right every single minute, and it's quite exhausting. So from a clinical perspective, what does it mean to build resilience, and why is that important, especially during this time? And we'll start with Joanne.
So resilience, simply put, is our capacity to recover from tough situations. And those tough situations can be traumatic events. And it helps when you're able to recognize a traumatic event for what it is, and then just organizing a way to respond to it, because recovery is part of the resilience. And when you're able to find ways that you can cope in a healthy way, I think that is key, not just coping, but coping in a healthy way. It just gives you the confidence to tackle problems head on. And just that mentality of I've been there before and I've prevailed. So it sort of increases your confidence in places where you find yourself in adversity.
Yeah, I think what Joan said is very true. And it is a word that can sometimes be used a lot and we don't really know what it means. And when we think about resilience, it is about coping, managing, being able to move forward despite facing difficult situations. But when I think about resilience, I also think about certain words. You know, I think about strength and I also think about growth. When you go through a difficult situation and when you're resilient through it, it's not just about barely making it through that situation. It's also you being able to thrive after you've been through a difficult situation, still being able to live out your full potential, still being able to be happy, be fulfilled. You know, it's not just getting through it and then barely surviving, which is sometimes what happens to people when they don't get the support. So it's important to build resilience because life always happens. So just the way COVID, this pandemic sprung up on us, we didn't plan for it, we didn't know it was coming. There's always some good and bad that comes. That's just the nature of life. So it's important to build resilience because that's what will help us to deal with all the things that life throws us. And that's what will help us deal with all the different situations that we face, whether that's at work, whether that's in our own home, as parents, as family members, as friends, supporting one another, and so on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Lubi, when you mentioned growth and how resilience leads to growth, one of the terms that we use in our organization that we've learned in the psychology world is post-traumatic growth. So opposite of post-traumatic stress. How can trauma actually lead toward growth is something that we've been observing and exploring within our work. Can you share a little bit more about what is the impact that trauma could have, whether it leads to stress or leads to growth, and what does that look like?
Yeah, if we think about trauma and post-trauma stress, one of the things that we are talking about is a disruption. So when something traumatic happens, life doesn't continue as normal. Something has happened that's outside the norm, that's beyond your capacity to manage, and that can be overwhelming. So when somebody is affected negatively by that, it disrupts their lives. So that disruption can show itself in different ways. One of the ways that we see it is just you not being able to function the way that you used to. So just your daily functioning, you being able to do the things that you used to do well, go to work, if you're in school, go to school and study. It affects relationships. That's definitely affected. So you're not able to relate to others the way that you used to relate well. Another thing that it does is it shatters your basic sense of safety. So if we think about trauma as something out of the norm, there's a certain way that we understand and know our world works. And when something terrible happens, it breaks that assumption of the world is meant to be a safe place, or this person is supposed to protect me, or because I'm a good person, if I do the right thing, I can stay safe. It then shatters that and changes it. So something is disrupted in that and your relationships can be affected. Another thing that happens is just you beginning to not trust other people, because a lot of times trauma is a result of other people doing something to you, or it can be something that's happened, let's say the COVID pandemic, that nobody really has done anything, but people's response to that. So how your loved ones support you after you've been through a traumatic event. So that can either help you get through it, or it can make you lose trust in others and their ability to support you or to be there with you during that time. So that's what the negative side looks like.
I love what Lubi has said, and I think basically just talking about these mental health issues, and sometimes it's good that people know what to look out for, because when you talk about sometimes about the vegetative functions, for example, sometimes we think that if a person is not eating and maybe they are sleeping a lot more, then it means that's when they have the mental health issues. But sometimes it can exhibit in a way that you don't expect, in a way that maybe even a person has increased appetite, or maybe they are sleeping okay, or even better than before. If you're looking, that is, if you're looking at them, you would think they're sleeping a bit more. So sometimes it's good to just be clear about what to look out for. And I think we can continue sharing some of these resources so that we can know what we are looking out for, because otherwise we wouldn't know that a person is going through the mental health issues as a result of the trauma.
Yeah, that's an excellent point in terms of observing what trauma might look like. So currently with COVID-19, right, we've heard that there's been a rise of sexual violence or domestic violence cases as people are forced to shelter at home when home is unsafe. And that's been the case for a lot of our scholars as well, where because schools have been closed and they're normally in boarding schools, they're placed back at home, which was the environment of trauma, or where the perpetrator was, or where they experienced that unsafety. So what is it that you're doing in your role, and how is Freely in Hope's responding to this issue, and how are we providing that sense of safety and trust for the survivors in our community? Let's start with Joanne.
Okay, thank you. When you talk about COVID-19, you know, in itself as a pandemic, it caused so many, sort of like a ripple effect. Schools were on, suddenly people have gone home, people are working from home. And I think for us, or rather for me, it's been the first time I'm doing remote case management. We usually do face-to-face a lot of it. So I think we must be present to the fact that survivors are at a risk of being re-traumatized because the pandemic in itself and the way things seem, it seemed to sort of take them back to that place where they felt like they're out of control. So we must be aware of that. And I think we've been doing everything that we can for those who cannot go back to their homes, they're in safe housing. And even for those who are at home with their families, we do frequent check-ins, and that are strengthened by social workers check-ins also, because we work as a team. By the way, teamwork, you can't do it without working as a team. And I think we've also gone to a place where we haven't gone before, and those are phone sessions. This is a foreign concept that we are working on. And we've had girls, you know, our girls speak up on that, and they're really giving it a chance, which is a good thing that reminds us that we can't rule anything out until we've tried it, and the results are awesome. The results are awesome.
Yeah, I think in Zambia, we're also doing the same as Freely in Hope. You know, Nicole, earlier you were talking about how there's been a rise in domestic violence cases. It's not surprising, because when people are stressed, we expect to see acting out behaviors, we expect to see more negative outcomes, more negative behaviors. So since we are facing this COVID pandemic, which has brought about a lot of changes, and people don't know how to adapt to those changes, those people that resort to beating somebody else because they can't cope with stress, they're more likely to do those things. So it's not surprising that we have a rise in those numbers, and we can continue to expect that that will be the case, unfortunately. In Zambia, as Freely in Hope, we're doing similar work to what Joanne is doing, and the main reason for transitioning our scholars to virtual sessions, whether that's by phone or other medium, is to ensure that there's continuity. Earlier, I was talking about trauma and how trauma disrupts. So one of the ways that we can just easily counter trauma is to stop the disruption and have continuity despite what's going on. And it's important to not just continue as things used to be, because we can't meet face to face. That's putting our scholars at risk. That's possibly putting us at risk. There's something that we need to do to adapt. And in that case, adapting has meant phoning them for those sessions. As we're doing that, we're also modeling something to our scholars. You know, we're modeling that a crisis can come, a trauma, a pandemic can come up that's unexpected. But during that time, we can find ways to manage it. So there's always something that you can do, even in a difficult situation. And there are things that you can adapt to still make them work for you. So in a way, we're continuing to support them, but we're also modeling something that's very important to them. even if we don't put it into words, but they're seeing it. So this is something that then will guide them or show them another time that they face another crisis. It may not be a pandemic. It's right, something has happened, but we can still continue. What can we do about this situation? How can we still modify or make a plan with what's going on and continue? I think I've been really inspired by our scholars that even though they're in these homes where there's this increase in domestic violence, they're possibly at risk and we've had to move them out and put them into safe houses, that even whilst they're dealing with their own trauma, they've been able to reach out to community members and do something to make a difference. You know, we've had them speaking to young people like themselves, informing them about what COVID is. They've handed out sanitizers, obviously with the support of Freely in Hope, but there's something that they're doing. And that's what's also really important if we think about building resilience. It's crises will happen, but what can we do about them? How can we think about the things that we have control over, and how can we maximize those things to have an impact that's good, not just for ourselves, but our communities as well? Because if everyone is cared for, then we all do better, you know, through our shared suffering. That's how we can build our resilience. So it's been really inspiring to see the girls. I mean, I've been inspired to do even more.
Yeah, what you're saying in terms of crises will always happen. So as like leadership lessons, right? As a leader, my job is to mitigate crises, right? But recognizing how, especially in this work with trauma, crises will always happen. And I think early on in my work, I was really like stunned at the fact that, oh my gosh, I can't mitigate emergencies, but what can I do? You know, if crises are going to happen, what can I do? And what you both have shared about establishing that safe space for our scholars, for our community members, for our staff even, has been our utmost priority. And yeah, I just want to encourage other leaders out there that are still trying to figure out how to navigate all of this. We're all trying to figure it out. And if we can all really gather our communities in a way that is safe and secure, and they're able to share in that sense of safe space, then I think we can move forward together. Like the both of you, I've also been very encouraged by the stories of our survivors and how they've been responding in creative and innovative ways. The girls are always like texting me like pictures that they drew, or like paintings that they did, or like songs that they're writing, or poems. So they're always like thinking of how they can use these opportunities, use these difficult opportunities as ways to be innovative, and that brings inspiration to us. And the whole reason why I started Freely in Hope is because I was so inspired by the resilience of survivors, because their sense of strength is completely beyond me, that there's so much that I can learn from, and so much I am still learning in this work. And so for you as well, as you've worked with our survivors, what is it that you've learned, and what is it that we can learn in terms of their sense of resilience? We'll start with Lubi on this one.
I've learned a lot. You know, one of the ways that we support our survivors is just by witnessing them. And by witnessing, I mean sitting with them as they share their stories, as they share their trauma, helping them reprocess what happened, helping them find ways to cope and to manage despite what happened. And for me, what I've learned is there is a lot of pain in suffering. There is a lot of pain that our survivors have gone through, but there are things that can be done and things that can happen to reduce that pain, not just so that the pain goes away, but to still enable them to live a full life, you know? And I think that's one of the things that's really in Hope, you know, it's not just about can we then provide the bare minimum so that they continue? It's how can they still go on to fulfill their leadership potential? We have survivors that are now leaders in the organization, you know, so that has really inspired me. Coming from a broken place, a place where some of them might have even thought the world was ending, or it would be better off for them to be dead. And then you see those same people being able to go ahead, forge a path, support others, come up with all these creative ways to support other people. That has really been inspiring for me. It's been inspiring even in my work, just to think about how we support people in general who have mental health struggles. Maybe it may not necessarily be trauma, and thinking about how the experiences they've gone through are things that they can actually learn from. And because they've been through those experiences, it can help them help other people who are going through a difficult situation. It can help them to view the world differently. So yes, their sense of trust has been shattered. Yes, their sense of safety was taken away. But that might be the thing that then motivates them to create safety for others. That might be the thing that motivates them to be different for others, to change policies, to fight for others. You know, that's been really, really inspiring for me to see.
Yeah, I love what you've just talked about. And I think this pandemic has allowed each one of us to sort of walk in the shoes of the survivors, because in the past, we've always imagined how it would feel. But people are going through this traumatic event, COVID-19, because it is a pandemic and it is a traumatic event. And we are finding meaning and we're finding purpose amidst this pandemic. And I think one good thing that will come out of this is maybe the world will be a more empathetic place, because people truly know how it feels to go through a traumatic event. And I think we're just reminded to look sort of at the simple pleasures in life, and to learn from the survivors, like you've talked about. Look at them and just marvel in the strength that they exhibit in day-to-day things. And I think for the first time, we are truly appreciating how adaptive we are as human beings, in how we're doing our work, in how we are choosing our actions and our attitude, and how we choose to move on as opposed to just give up. And just reminding ourselves that we have control over how we respond to the things that are happening around us. And that is what will keep us going.
Yeah, awesome. So as we've observed how our survivors have been incredibly resilient in their own healing journey, and especially now during this pandemic, what are some practices for building resilience for all of us that we can start to incorporate and embody in our routine? Joanne?
I want to go back to the practice that we do, especially in counseling, and in most of the, because when we're dealing with survivors, you have to give trauma-informed care. And trauma-informed care means that you appreciate the cognitive behavioral aspects of things, in that what we think about is exhibited in our behavior, and what we feel manifests in the way we behave and in the way we think. So it's really about our thoughts, our actions, and our feelings. And we come back to that so that we are keenly aware of what am I thinking, what am I feeling, how am I sort of responding to it, how am I reacting. And when you come to that and you're able to go through the cognitive behavioral practices, then you're able to get to a place where you fit, you know. And that means that sometimes you need to reframe your thoughts, like we talked about. Have that fighter mentality as opposed to a victim mentality where you just give up. And I think it's very important that each and every one of us support, be it professional support in seeking out for professional care, be it support within our family, within our support systems, within our workplaces. Let us seek out support. We are social creatures, and there's no shame in reaching out. And again, we're just reminded to focus on what we can control. I think I cannot emphasize that enough. Because if you're at a mental place where you just focusing on what you can control, then you're able to start from there. Yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Joanne, because a lot of times when we're in a crisis, we think about all the things that are going wrong, all the things that we can't control, but that doesn't help us build resilience. That just makes us feel more hopeless, more helpless. It makes us feel terrified, and then we feel stuck. There's nothing that you can do. But if you focus on the things that you can actually do something about, you start to feel a sense of agency, a sense of power, a sense that there's something that I can do. There are ways that I can act on the world that can make a difference, even in spite of everything else that's going on. So I think that is something that all of us can think about and be practice, you know. Another thing is just really reflection. So think a little bit about how you're coping, reflect on what you're doing, reflect on how others around you are coping and how they're doing, and then be intentional. So I think reflection would be the first thing, and then being intentional is the second thing. When there's a crisis, it's easy to just go with the flow or to go with your emotions. If I feel scared this morning, I'm not going to do the things I need to do. Or if I am feeling frustrated, I'll just lash out at someone. But when you're intentional, you're mindful. So you think about the things that you're doing, but also you remember the things that have helped you through difficult situations in the past, right? And that is really what resilience is you've been through a different situation that was really tough. You learned some lessons through it about yourself, about the world, and about situations. And then you use that in a way that can help you the next time you face a tough situation to help you to get through that. And of course, I can't overemphasize community. You know, Nicole, earlier you were talking about how, you know, for leaders, you're always managing crises. You need people around you, you know, whether that's your own therapists, your own peers that you can consult with that are also doing similar work to you. Myself and Joanna, I know she does this, is supervision for yourself, someone to talk about how you're feeling. Even just in our own families, making sure that you're staying connected to others, to friends, people that pour into you, people that remind you about who you are, people that can also help you think correctly. You know, earlier Joanne was talking about our thoughts and how our thoughts can affect our feelings and how our feelings can affect our behaviors. If you're isolated, which is what trauma can do, you know, it disrupts and it isolates you, you stop trusting other people, you're not able to have somebody there to help give you perspective, you know, that maybe you're thinking about something as in a way that's not helpful. Because you're feeling hopeless, your thoughts are all hopeless, helpless feelings and thoughts. But when you have people around you, they can help you reframe that. They can help you identify when you're doing that, when you're catastrophizing and getting caught up in your own head. Someone else can give you a reality check. So it's important that through all of this, we all strive to stay connected with others. That will really help us.
Yeah, so I hope everyone can see why having therapists in your life are really important, because all the wisdom, all the knowledge is right here in this room. So thank you for sharing that. I just want to remind everyone that the Q&A box is open. So if you have any questions, feel free to put it out there and we'll answer it in just a couple moments. As we're talking about practices for building resilience, so as a leader, like even for myself, I've been trying to figure out, okay, with this shelter at home mandate, with not being able to go out, I'm actually supposed to be in Kenya right now, not being able to be on the field, like it's just been so difficult for me. And what I'm finding is that because I have essentially more time because I'm not on the field, I'm just filling my time with more stuff. So more projects, more webinars, more phone conversations, more things, because I don't know. I think part of my functioning system too is that when there's a crisis, I just want to overwork it so that I can try to mitigate it even more. So that obviously leads to burnout and exhaustion, right? So I just feel like in this whole like season of learning and unlearning and trying new methods, I've just been really tired. So I've been trying to figure out, okay, what kind of practices are working for me personally to equip and support my own leadership so that I can provide that same support and safety to my team. One of the things that my mom taught me very early on, she was like, how are you going to make change in the world if you can't even make your bed in the morning? So something like as simple as that is like making your bed is something small that you can control, and letting that resonate throughout the rest of your life is something that I've been trying to figure out. So like personally, one of my practices is I try to limit how many phone calls I have per day. I take a midday break to do yoga and meditation, which has been my life-saving like thing. And then I practice like some kind of cardio thing later on in the evening. And I cook dinner for my family just as a way of extending generosity. And that way of serving others has also been supporting me in my own serving myself too. So what are some personal practices that you are all developing as well in your own workflow? Because in your work, you're hearing all the trauma, you're hearing all the stories on a constant basis. And so what personal practices have you been able to develop for yourselves? Let's start with Lubi on this.
Okay, one of the things that I said I was passionate about when we started is living your life to the full, living out your full potential. And so one of the things that I've been very mindful of is, yes, a crisis is happening, but life is still happening. Life has not stopped. So how can I still continue to enjoy my life, even with these things that are going on? So one of the things that I've been intentionally doing is connecting with friends, friends and family, people that mean a lot to me. We've been having Zoom parties. I don't know how many of you have been doing that, but just trying to take advantage of the situation of, yes, I can't see them in person. I am a social creature, but how can I still get that despite, Another thing is, you were talking about our work and how it can be stressful. For me, this work is a passion, and that's part of what drew me to it. So it's actually been really fulfilling to be able to be in this crisis period and still do something that I think is making a difference in the world, that's making people's lives better, helping them cope better. So that makes me feel good about myself, and it helps me keep going. Of course, I've been doing that carefully. So I've been making sure that I am still managing my caseload, so not taking on more clients than I should, getting supervision, getting some support with my cases and so on, just to make sure that I'm not overwhelmed with that. And I have 2 daughters. So another thing I've been doing is just intentionally playing with them, connecting with them. They're quite young, so they're not as aware of what's going on in the world. One of them who's in preschool is, because she can't go into school anymore and play with her friends, but the younger one isn't. And it's just been nice to connect, laugh with them, connect with that innocence, and just be able to still be a mom. Yes, COVID pandemic is going on, but I am still mommy to somebody, and I can still enjoy that and do good things there. So those are some things I've intentionally been doing.
Oh, Joanne, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. I love that you've spoken about the different roles that we take on. And sometimes we can get carried away by one role and we forget everything else. So I think it's very important to have a routine and commit to it. Now that we're working from home, just have a work from home routine and then take a break, take a break, do something that's light, that will lift your moods. It can be a hobby, like you're saying, connecting with friends. It can be a mom moment with your kids. I'm also a mom to young kids, and I find myself playing silly games with them. And I think it helps to keep you grounded. And I think a routine is very important, especially now that we're in a crisis, because we talked about it. When you're in a crisis, you tend to go into survival mode. So a routine helps ground you so that you have some sense of control. And I think it's very important, just like what you said, self-care. And that can come in different ways. It's good to have an awareness of what speaks to you, what gives you peace. For some, it's meditation. For some, it's journaling. For some, they'll just listen to nice music and everything is okay in the world. So it's good to know what works for you and just go with it. Keep trying out new things though, so that then you have a different array of, stuff to choose from.
Yeah, you mentioned meditation, and I just want to share that that's been my life-saving, everything-saving practice, daily practice, because especially now where we are kind of forced into silence and solitude during this time, it could either
Mm,
like increase anxiety, especially if we're more extroverted, or it can also increase depression for some that are prone to that. So there's a lot of things that can escalate as a result of being in silence and solitude. At the same time, I think the gifts of silence and solitude is that opportunity to connect with yourself and with the divine in you and with God. And I think just that reminder of being still in the presence of the divine has been my life-saving practice to ensure that I'm not trying to fix everything in the world, because I can't, right? Especially like these things that I cannot control. And just sitting with
mm,
that and being okay with it is what also has helped me build resilience. So daily meditation practice and just being with the silence, though very difficult, can actually help to repair a lot of the brokenness in our bodies and even like disconnection in our brain. And so meditation does the work that we actually can't do in like the physical. And that's like, I think the beauty of the brain, right, is that it can heal itself. And so as we're doing these different practices, including meditation, including exercise, including connection with friends and playing with our children, all of those things are actually repairing in ways that we can't see. So I think that's a beautiful part about our bodies. We have a question from Kay. She asks, what role does staying refreshed have in resilience building? What role does staying refreshed have in resilience building?
A big role. If you're tired, you can't do anything, right? You may have all the good intentions. You might know that meditation is good for you. You might know that playing with your children is good. It's important to connect with others. But if you're tired, then you don't have the energy to even do that. So one of the critical things that help with resilience is just making sure that you're getting enough rest. And rest looks different to different people. So rest is making sure that you get enough sleep. Rest is making sure that you take a break from the people that you're around. You know, now with the COVID pandemic, we find ourselves surrounded by people all day that
mm,
typically we may not have spent the whole day with. How can you take some time out for yourself? Whether it's to journal, like Joanne was saying, or to meditate, like Nicole was saying, but find ways to rest. You know, what activities refresh you? So think about the things that energize you. You know, for some people, it's making crafts. For some people, it's taking a walk. For some people, it's taking a nice shower that gets them going and energized for the day.
mm.
Whatever it is, look for it, find what it is, and make sure that you do it, because being refreshed is crucial in being resilient during these times.
Mm. Yeah, rest is indeed very important because in addition to everything that you have said, when you're well rested, then you're able to respond as opposed to reacting. Because reacting is sort of automatic, you know, go with it. But when you're responding, you allow yourself to briefly stop and then think through everything, observe what is within your space to work with, and then you proceed with it. So just rest allows you to make good decisions, so to say. Yeah.
Yeah, there's an Instagram account that I follow called The Nap Ministry, and it's so great because I have been like averse to naps because I feel like that's such a waste of time. Like I sleep at night, that's enough. But I'm finding that I'm just feeling more exhausted because of the emotional stress and trauma of what's happening around me, that I'm like trying to tell my mind that it's okay, you know, to like rest and to nap or whatever it may be. So like one of the quotes they have is, how will we thrive and lead justice movements if we are sleep deprived, right? So in anything, how will we parent if we are sleep deprived? How will we ensure that our teams are supported if we are sleep deprived? We have a question from someone who's Zambian, based in the Netherlands, and she asks, how do I deal with disturbing information coming in about COVID-19 back at home and also around me? That's a tough one.
I think one of the things that I am intentionally doing is limiting how much information and news I'm getting. So that might be something that this person can consider doing. You know, it's one of the easy things that you can do throughout the day. You know, here in Zambia, we have the Ministry of Health that has updates. And then after they've had the updates, every news site, social media site sort of repeats that, tells you about how many new cases, how many deaths, how many recoveries. And it can really become all consuming. It can start to weigh on you. It can start to, yes, just make you feel really tired, deplete you, you know. So it's important that, yes, you need to know what's going on around you, because that's what will help you to make good decisions and to take care of yourself and others around you. But you don't have to know what's going on around you all the time and to all that detail. So it might help to maybe just set aside time a day that you would listen to what the latest update is, limit any discussions about new cases and so on to that time. And then anything outside of that time, you're not engaging with. So in therapy, it's so interesting, we call it worry time. I use it as well with, you know, other younger children that I see. It's right, when you have worry time, you have all the time to worry. You can time yourself in 10 minutes, just worry away. Once worry time is finished, you're not allowed to worry until the next worry time. So what that does is you're not going into denial and pretending that these things are not happening or thinking about things that are actually upsetting to you, but you're containing it so that it doesn't spill over into every part of your life. And that is the thing that then can immobilize you, make you feel stuck, make you feel overwhelmed, and not be resilient during this time. And so I think that's one of the things that she can do, is just limiting the amount of information you're taking in.
I love what you've talked about, because by the way, as part of how we're helping support our scholars, we always send out stuff that is good for their mental health and just something that they can keep assessing themselves. And there's something we sent out that is about naming your boundaries when it comes to COVID-19 as a pandemic. And those boundaries can sound like, please don't send me any more materials about COVID-19. It can sound like, I don't want to talk about COVID-19 for the rest of the day. So it's okay to name your boundaries, whatever those boundaries may be. Let the people around you know. If it's about social media, if you're realizing you're in a group that keeps sending out such stuff, you can mute the notifications. Again, we come back to you realizing that you have control and just putting up those boundaries for your self-care.
Excellent. Another question we have is, resilience seems to be like a muscle that we have to exercise so that it's there when we need it. Can you share your experience about how we practice resilience in the everyday as well as in times of crisis? I'll start with this one. So about 6 years ago, I hit a wall and was like completely burned out, and actually was hospitalized in Zambia. I shared this in another webinar. And it was because I was not building in those practices of resilience and rest and just refreshment during those times. And so when I finally hit the wall, it was one of those times of crisis where I had nothing left to carry myself through. So since then, I have been trying to kind of stay to that schedule, like we said before. For me, it's working out every day, and it's meditation, and it's spending time with people that I love and care for. And all of those things as daily practice is now even more important now, where I'm trying to spend even more time in prayer and meditation, more time with people that I care about, because I have those things that work for me and I know it works for me well. And so because of that, I can look back to that and say, okay, because these practices work for me in my crisis, I'm going to carry it through and even maybe expand on it more, so that I can find joy even in crisis. And those are the things that give me joy.
Yeah, earlier, Nicole, you talked about how taking a nap during the day used to feel like a waste of time. but now you need it. I think one of the things that can help us to build resilience is trying out new things. A lot of times we get used to doing things a certain way, and that might work when things are okay. But it's important that we try out different things when the situation is different, right? That's part of what makes us adaptable. The thing that helped you when there's nothing that's stressful is not the thing that will be helpful when there's a lot of things that are stressful. You need to adapt and change and do something differently. Equally, and this is some of what we help our survivors with, when you are out of that crisis situation, you also need to adapt to life then, because a lot of people, what happens with trauma is it continues on long after they're in a traumatic situation or in an unsafe place, because they've gone into survival mode, as Joan was saying earlier. You've learned how to be to survive that place, but you're no longer in that place. You no longer have to react or respond in those ways. There's a different way of being that you can be. So it's important to try out new things. I think that's one of the things that can help you build resilience. I think also similar to trying out new things is just stretching yourself. So, the question was, how do you build resilience during normal times? How you build resilience is doing some things that are out of your comfort zone. So it might be at work. You get really anxious, maybe giving a presentation or public speaking. How can you sign up for the next talk or presentation? Deal with the anxiety that brings up for you, survive it and see that you can manage it. And then next time you are in another situation that maybe brings on a lot more anxiety because it's a crisis, you have an experience of having stretched yourself and having used a coping technique or strategy that worked for you. So you can draw on that to help you to manage the new situation.
Awesome. Joanne, anything to add there?
No.
Okay.
I think she's sort of said it all, and I think it boils down to embarking on a journey of self-awareness, because then that is when you know what works better for me, what is working out, what do I need to invest on more. So basically, I just encourage everyone to go on a journey towards self-discovery. It's really helpful when you're self-aware.
Yeah, since we can't get on a plane and go on a physical journey, we can go through an inner journey during this time.
Yes.
So I wonder, what the gifts will be from that experience. To conclude, one of my favorite quotes that I have to bring to mind often is from Father Henry Nouwen, and he says, "Humanity suffers, and the sharing of that suffering is what moves us forward." And so I hope that the conversations that we have today and sharing the different sufferings that we may have experienced on the field, within our own personal lives, and even as those watching have had a time to self-reflect, that the sharing is what will help us move forward as we continue on from here. Do you two have any last words to share with us? We'll start with Lubi.
I think compassion and empathy. As we go through this and share through our suffering, and all of us are experiencing this, it's important to have compassion for others, compassion for yourself. It's important that you try to put yourself in other people's shoes, because I think one of the things that also can happen is, because we're in the same situation, we sometimes think everyone is experiencing it the same way. Some people are doing okay, some people are thriving, some people are really suffering. So it's important that you are self-aware and are aware of how it's affecting you, but you also connect to others and how it might be affecting them, because that gives you room to take some action that might be helpful for them. But also, even if you are really struggling through this time or are being re-traumatized because you have your own history of trauma, empathizing with others is also a good way to separate yourself from your emotions. So if you start to think about another person, what they're thinking, what they're going through, it gives you a break from some of your own feelings and how you're feeling. And that break can be the thing that you need to help you to continue to move forward. So yes, let's continue to practice compassion and empathy for others, even as we go through this, and for ourselves too.
Yeah, I think COVID-19 is really strange, because maybe because up until it's in our faces, many of us were like, "Psh, there's nothing to it. And I'm just reminded of the fact that we may not know it, but because you're going through a traumatic event, we are going what we call anticipatory grief, where you're imagining the worst that could possibly happen, and you tend to live in that situation, and that would mean that you're living in survival mode. It's good that we recognize that there will be many mental health issues that arise from it, and in fact, people with pre-existing mental illnesses may find that for those who've been stable, they are relapsing. We may find people who've never had mental health issues, and suddenly there's anxiety and there's all sorts of feelings that I even don't know what I'm feeling. And it's good that we all realize that we are at a place where we are grieving because we've lost something. If we are able to recognize that, then we are able to ground ourselves in where we are. And like we said, we always have to start from recognize where you are so that you're able to path your way forward. And I think it's very important that I can't encourage people enough. Reach out to the people around you. You may not know a healthcare provider directly, but your contacts may know someone who may know someone who may know someone. So just reach out.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Lubi and Joanne, for offering your wisdom and your work, not only for the Freely and Hope community, but for all of those all over the world who are watching this. I trust that your experiences and your advice that you've given to us today will resonate with us throughout our lives, really, to provide lasting and sustaining support systems for us as we pursue our work together. So thank you so much for your time. Next week's webinar will be about how we can be creative and innovate during times of crisis and in this pandemic. We'll be joined by one of my best friends, Rebecca Crook from the Metis Foundation, and she'll be sharing how their organization has been finding creative and innovative ways to respond to the pandemic, and Freely and Hope will also be sharing the perspective on our end as well. So thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you next time. Bye.
Bye.